Beneath its glaciers, a mile thick in places, lie fragments of a past that defy our understanding, strange formations, ancient maps, and tales of encounters that blur the line between myth and reality. Why does this remote land, battered by howling winds and shrouded in eternal frost, feel like a vault sealed by the ages? International treaties guard its borders, restricting access to a chosen few, while vast regions remain forbidden. Even to the curious eye of science, what truths does Antarctica conceal, and why does its silence speak louder than words?
Welcome to Secrets of the Ancients, where ancient mysteries awaken.
In the grammar of our world, some places are punctuation. They are the commas that give us pause, the periods that end known territories. But Antarctica is something else entirely. It is a question mark, frozen in white at the bottom of the globe, and within its vast, unread pages in the most remote mountain range on Earth, we find an exclamation point that defies all syntax: the Ellsworth Mountains. The name itself barely does justice to the reality. This is not a range you hike, it's a fortress you survive. Stretching for over 240 miles, it's a jagged spine of rock and ice, a barrier of crushing pressure and relentless cold. Here the winds are born, katabatic gales that pour off the polar plateau like invisible rivers, reaching speeds of nearly 200 miles per hour. The temperatures can plunge to a level where steel becomes brittle as glass. This is a landscape stripped bare of all sentimentality. It is raw, primordial, and profoundly hostile to life as we know it. It is, for all intents and purposes, another planet hiding on our own. For decades, this realm was known only to a handful of hardened explorers and scientists. But in 2016, the fortress was breached, not by an icebreaker or a climbing party, but by a silent eye in orbit. Through the sterile digital stream of satellite data, something impossible took shape: an anomaly, a ghost in the machine. There, amidst the chaotic jumble of shattered peaks and glacial flows, was a form of shocking regularity. A structure with four steep, distinct faces converging to a near-perfect point. A mountain, yes, but a mountain sculpted with the precision of a master craftsman. The discovery didn't trickle into public awareness, it detonated. The images went viral, spreading through the digital nervous system of the planet like wildfire. And immediately, our modern human tribe fractured into its two primordial camps, the believers and the skeptics. For some, it was the smoking gun, the long-awaited proof that our history books were missing entire chapters, perhaps entire volumes. For others, it was a classic case of wishful thinking, of seeing a face in the clouds, a geological Rorschach test on a continental scale. The question was locked in. Are we looking at a grand monument, a silent testament to a forgotten age? Or are we staring at a magnificent mirage, a trick of light, ice, and time? The debate is not just about a single mountain. It's a philosophical battleground, pitting the elegant logic of geology against the intoxicating allure of a lost civilization. To find the truth, we must venture into both territories, starting with the cold, hard science of the rock itself. To a geologist, the Antarctic pyramid is not an anomaly. It's a classic example of a landform known as a pyramidal peak, or more technically, a glacial horn. The official and most widely accepted explanation is that this structure is a nunatak, an Inuit word that so perfectly captures the concept: an island of rock in a sea of ice. These are the highest peaks of a mountain range that has been almost completely buried by an ice sheet. Only their defiant summits break the surface, enduring the full, unrelenting fury of the polar environment. To understand how such a feature could be formed, we have to think not in human timescales, but in deep time. The Ellsworth Mountains themselves are ancient storytellers. They are composed primarily of Paleozoic and Mesozoic rocks, sedimentary layers laid down in an ancient sea hundreds of millions of years ago, later twisted, folded, and uplifted by the tectonic collision that formed the supercontinent of Gondwana. This is rock that has seen worlds come and go. It was there before the dinosaurs, and it was there to witness their demise. And for the last 34 million years, it has been locked in a brutal war with ice. The sculptor in this story is erosion, but not the gentle erosion of water and wind we see in temperate lands. This is a far more violent, elemental artist. The primary tool is a process called freeze-thaw weathering. It's a simple mechanism with profound consequences. During the brief, fleeting moments of polar summer when the temperature hovers near melting point, water from snowmelt seeps into the microscopic cracks and fissures of the rock. As night falls or the season turns, that water freezes. And as water turns to ice, it expands by about 9%, exerting a tremendous hydraulic pressure from within the rock itself. It's like driving a wedge into the mountain's soul. Imagine this process repeated, not for a week or a year, but for millions of cycles. A microscopic crack becomes a fissure becomes a gash. The mountain is being relentlessly broken apart from the inside out. The second tool is the wind. The katabatic winds of Antarctica are the most powerful, persistent winds on the planet. They are not gusts, they are a constant gravitational flow of dense, cold air. And this wind is not empty. It's armed with billions of tiny, razor-sharp ice crystals. This creates a relentless sandblasting effect known as wind abrasion or Aeolian erosion. Over eons, this process can polish, carve, and flute rock surfaces, especially on the windward faces of a mountain, often creating smooth, flattened plains called ventifacts. But the most powerful sculptor of all is the glacier itself. Imagine the entire Ellsworth Range being ground down by a continent-sized sheet of sandpaper. As the ice sheet flows, it performs two actions. First, glacial plucking. The ice freezes onto blocks of rock, and as the glacier moves, it literally rips them from the bedrock, carrying them away. Second, glacial abrasion. The rocks and debris already embedded in the bottom of the glacier act like the grit on sandpaper, scouring and grinding the surface of the mountain it passes over. Now, let's bring these forces together. Picture a single, large mountain mass. Over millions of years, multiple glaciers, called cirque glaciers, begin to form on its flanks, carving bowl-shaped depressions. If 3 or more of these cirques eat away at the mountain from different sides, they will eventually carve the rock mass between them into a sharp, pointed peak with steep, concave walls. This is a glacial horn. The most famous example, of course, is the Matterhorn in the Swiss Alps. Its iconic pyramidal shape wasn't built, it was revealed. It's what was left over after the surrounding rock was carved away by the glaciers below. We see similar formations all over the world where alpine glaciation has occurred. Mount Assiniboine in Canada, known as the Matterhorn of the Rockies, Mount Thielsen in Oregon, Pilot Peak in Wyoming. Nature, it seems, has a fondness for pyramids. So the geological argument is this: the Antarctic pyramid is a nunatak, a colossal horn sculpted by the intersection of multiple glaciers and weathered by millions of years of freeze-thaw cycles and katabatic winds. Its 4 faces are the remnant walls of the cirques that carved it, and its symmetry is a beautiful, but ultimately coincidental, result of these erosional forces acting on the pre-existing weaknesses and fracture patterns within the ancient rock. This explanation carries with it a certain philosophical weight. It leans on the principle of Occam's razor, the idea that the simplest explanation is usually the correct one. Before we leap to conclusions about lost civilizations or alien architects, we must first exhaust all known natural processes. And in this case, geology provides a robust, evidence-based, and elegant explanation. It also forces us to confront our own cognitive biases. The human brain is a pattern-seeking machine. We are hardwired to find order in chaos, to see faces in toast, animals in clouds, and intention in coincidence. This phenomenon, called pareidolia, is a deep-seated survival instinct. In a dangerous, primitive world, it was better to mistakenly see a predator in the bushes than to miss a real one. In the modern world, this instinct leads us to see pyramids in mountains. The structure's resemblance to the pyramids of Giza feels profound because our minds are built to make that connection. But from a purely scientific standpoint, this feeling is not evidence. The universe is filled with magnificent geometry, the hexagonal cells of a honeycomb, the spiral of a galaxy, the fractal patterns of a snowflake. It would be more surprising if, in all the chaotic beauty of nature, a shape like a pyramid never occurred. The scientific narrative concludes that what we are seeing is not a monument to a lost civilization, but a monument to time itself. It is a testament to the unimaginable power of ice and wind, a grand sculpture shaped by the patient, indifferent hand of nature over a span of time that dwarfs human history. The geological case is compelling. It's logical, it's consistent, and it's built on a century of established science. And yet, it doesn't quite satisfy. The mind, once it has seen the pyramid, cannot unsee it. The explanation feels correct, but it doesn't feel complete. A quiet, persistent doubt remains. The skepticism isn't born of ignorance, but of observation. We can accept the general principle of a glacial horn, but the specifics of this horn are what give us pause. Geologists show us pictures of the Matterhorn, but even it has a certain rugged, chaotic asymmetry. The Antarctic pyramid appears, at least from orbit, to possess a higher degree of order. The questions begin to pile up. While nature can create pyramidal peaks, how many have four faces of such apparent uniformity? How many have ridgelines that are so seemingly straight and sharp? Most natural formations bear the scars of their chaotic creation. They are asymmetrical, with one face more weathered by a dominant wind, another more heavily scoured by a more powerful glacier. This Antarctic structure seems to possess a balance, a deliberateness that feels different. Is it possible that the geologists, in their correct identification of the process, have missed the true nature of the subject? Could these natural forces have been acting upon something that was not entirely natural to begin with? It is in this crack of doubt, this space between the accepted explanation and the lingering mystery, that a far more extraordinary narrative begins to take shape. A narrative that requires us to rewind the clock, not just millions of years, but to a time when Antarctica was not a land of ice, but a land of life. To explore this second path, we must begin by challenging the premise of the first. We must look at the pyramid not as a geologist, but as an architect, an engineer, or an archaeologist. The first point of contention is the uniqueness of the structure. While geologists are quick to provide analogs like the Matterhorn, critics point out that these comparisons are flawed. Alpine horns are typically more jagged, their faces more concave and uneven. The Ellsworth Formation, by contrast, appears to have flatter faces and a more defined geometric silhouette, startlingly similar not to other mountains, but to man-made structures. The argument isn't that nature can't create pyramids, but whether it created this one. Coincidence is a powerful force, but is there a point where a coincidence becomes so precise that it demands a different explanation? This question gains immense weight when we consider the context of its location. An Antarctica that is geologically known to have once been a green, temperate world. This isn't speculation, it is scientific fact written in the fossil record. Let us travel back 100 million years to the mid-Cretaceous period. The world was a greenhouse. Carbon dioxide levels were many times higher than today, and there were no permanent polar ice caps. The continent we now call Antarctica was the heart of the southern supercontinent, Gondwana, connected to what would become Australia and South America. It was a world of impossible lushness. The evidence is buried deep, but it is there. Paleontologists drilling through the ice have pulled up core samples that read like chapters from a lost world. Near the Beardmore Glacier, not far from the South Pole, explorers have found the fossilized remains of conifers and deciduous beech trees, some of them 20 feet tall. They've found seams of coal, the compressed remains of vast, ancient swamps. They've discovered the fossilized pollen of flowering plants and the delicate impressions of fern leaves, including the Glossopteris fern, whose distribution across the southern continents was the key piece of evidence for the theory of continental drift. This was not a barren tundra. This was a vibrant, thriving ecosystem. Dinosaurs roamed these forests. Early mammals and marsupials scurried in the undergrowth. Rivers flowed to a warm southern ocean. For tens of millions of years, Antarctica was a paradise. The Great Freezing, the event that entombed the continent, began in earnest around 34 million years ago, when Antarctica broke away from its continental neighbors, allowing the cold circumpolar current to form and isolate it in a deep freeze. This leaves a window of time, a vast, yawning expanse of over 60 million years where this land was habitable. Could an intelligent civilization have risen and fallen in that time? It is a staggering thought. Human civilization. From the first stone tools to the smartphone has unfolded in a mere 5 million years, with recorded history being only a few thousand years old. Nature had a window more than 20 times that long to experiment with intelligence on the Antarctic continent. To dismiss this possibility out of hand is perhaps a failure of imagination, an anthropocentric arrogance that assumes our own brief, recent history is the only one that matters. If such a civilization existed, what would they have built? This leads us to the second pillar of the speculative argument, the global pyramid phenomenon. The pyramid is arguably the most universal and mysterious architectural form on Earth. It appears in cultures separated by vast oceans and millennia of time, cultures that supposedly had no contact with one another. Consider Giza in Egypt. We are taught they are tombs for the pharaohs, but many engineers and researchers have argued they are far more. The Great Pyramid is a miracle of mathematics and engineering. It is aligned to true north with an accuracy we have only recently been able to replicate. Its dimensions are said to encode advanced mathematical constants like pi and the golden ratio, phi. Theorists like Robert Bovell have famously proposed that the layout of the three Giza pyramids is a perfect terrestrial map of the three stars in Orion's belt. This wasn't just a tomb, it was a statement, a complex machine, a message written in stone. Now cross the Atlantic to Mesoamerica. At Teotihuacan in Mexico, the Pyramid of the Sun has a base perimeter almost identical to that of the Great Pyramid at Giza. The stepped pyramids of the Maya were not just temples. They were precise astronomical observatories, their stairways and windows aligned to track the movements of the Sun, Moon, and Venus, allowing their priests to create calendars of stunning accuracy. The pattern continues. We find mounds and pyramids in China, hidden and largely unexcavated near Xi'an. We have the controversial claims of man-made, pyramid-shaped hills in Bosnia. We have the incredible underwater structures off the coast of Yonaguni, Japan, which some geologists claim are natural, but which many others argue show clear evidence of being quarried and constructed. Why this global obsession with the pyramid shape? Was it a mere coincidence, the most stable way to build a tall structure? Or does it represent something deeper? A shared archetype from the collective unconscious, as the psychologist Carl Jung might have argued, or as other more fringe theories propose, is it evidence of a shared legacy? A mother culture, a lost civilization like Atlantis that seeded this architectural knowledge across the globe. If such a global program of pyramid building existed, whether psychological or physical, why would Antarctica be excluded? Especially when it was one of the most habitable places on the planet for millions of years. In this context, the discovery of a pyramid in the Ellsworth Mountains shifts from being an anomaly to being the missing piece of a global puzzle. It suggests the story of the pyramids is older and more widespread than we ever dared to imagine. This hypothesis is amplified when we look again at the satellite data. Proponents of the artificial origin theory claim the pyramid is not an isolated structure. They point to other strange features in the Ellsworth Range, glimpsed in satellite and radar imagery. Long linear ridges that appear to form grid-like patterns, faint, rectangular shapes that suggest buried walls or foundations. These are, of course, unverified and could easily be natural geological faults or imaging artifacts. But they fuel the speculation that the pyramid might be the centerpiece of a much larger complex, perhaps an entire city lost to time, entombed under 2 miles of ice. The final, frustrating piece of this narrative is the sheer inaccessibility of the site. This isn't Giza, where you can buy a ticket and walk right up to the stones. The Ellsworth Pyramid is located in one of the most hostile and protected places on Earth. A full-scale scientific expedition to the site would be a monumental undertaking, costing hundreds of millions of dollars and facing extreme logistical and physical dangers. Furthermore, the Antarctic Treaty System places strict regulations on any activity that could disturb the environment. The mystery is protected by a fortress of both ice and international law. We can look, but we cannot touch, and so we are left with a tantalizing, yet deeply unproven narrative. A story of a green Antarctica, home to a civilization so ancient it predates our own by tens of millions of years. A culture that was part of a global pyramid-building tradition, leaving behind a silent monument to its existence. A monument that was slowly, inexorably swallowed by ice as their world froze and died, leaving it as the only hint of a chapter of planetary history we never knew existed. This story is, by its very nature, speculative. It lacks the hard, physical proof that science demands, but it possesses something that the purely geological explanation lacks, a sense of profound, transformative meaning. It whispers that we are not the first, that our history is not the whole story, and that the greatest secrets of our world may still be waiting to be discovered, frozen in time at the bottom of the world. History is not a seamless road stretching from the past to the present. It is an archipelago of islands, points of light in a vast, dark ocean of the forgotten. We navigate by these known islands, Rome, Greece, Egypt, believing they are the whole world because the water between them is deep and silent. But every so often, a bottle washes ashore, containing a map of a place that shouldn't exist. A map that hints at other islands, other continents of knowledge, long since sunk beneath the waves of time. Our story begins in one of history's great treasure chests, Istanbul, 1929. We are in the Topkapi Palace, a place that was for centuries the very heart of the formidable Ottoman Empire. This is not a sterile museum. The air itself feels thick with the ghosts of sultans, viziers, and scholars. It is a labyrinth of opulence and intrigue, a repository of a fallen empire's accumulated wealth and wisdom. It was here, during a routine cataloging of the palace's vast library, that a German theologian named Gustav Diesmann stumbled upon something extraordinary tucked away on a dusty shelf. It was not a book nor a jewel, but a map, a section of a larger world map meticulously drawn on the supple, time-weathered skin of a gazelle. The script was Ottoman Turkish, the illustrations vibrant, the coastlines traced with a confident, knowing hand. At first glance, it was recognized for what it was: a priceless example of 16th century Islamic cartography, a portolan chart designed for navigation, detailing the coasts of Europe, North Africa, and the western shores of a new world that was, at the time, still a source of immense wonder and speculation. The map was dated to the month of Muharram in the Islamic year 919, which corresponds to the spring of 1513 in the Western calendar, and it was signed by its creator, a man named Piri ibn Haji Maimed. History would know him simply as Piri Rise. For years, the map was celebrated for its known qualities. Its depiction of the South American coast, just 2 decades after Columbus's first voyage, was remarkably accurate for its era. It was a historical gem, a testament to the sophistication of Ottoman science and their access to the latest Portuguese and Spanish intelligence. It was an important island in the archipelago of our known history, and that is all it was, until scholars began to look closer, until they looked south. Past the familiar contours of Brazil, past the known world of the 16th century, and into a realm of pure enigma. It was there, at the very bottom of the world, that they found a coastline that had no business being on any map from 1513. A coastline that, according to our version of history, had been buried under a mile of solid ice for thousands, if not millions, of years. To understand the map, we must first understand the man. Piri Rise was no armchair academic. He was a creature of the sea, a corsair, a cartographer, and a high-ranking admiral in the formidable Ottoman Navy. The title Rise itself translates to captain. He was the nephew of the legendary privateer Kemal Rise, with whom he sailed the Mediterranean, battling the fleets of Venice, Genoa, and Spain. This was a man of action, a brilliant military strategist, and a worldly scholar who spoke multiple languages. He was not a man prone to fantasy. When he drew a line on a map, it was because he had information from sailors, from spies, or from sources far, far older. And Piri Rise tells us himself where he got his information. In the marginalia of the map, in his elegant script, he left a breadcrumb trail for future generations. He wrote that in compiling this masterwork, he did not rely on his own surveys alone. Instead, he consulted approximately 20 different source charts. Some were contemporary, captured from Spanish and Portuguese ships or created by his fellow Muslim geographers. He explicitly mentions using 4 Portuguese maps detailing the newest discoveries, as well as an Arab map of India. He even claims to have used a map drawn by Columbus, a priceless artifact that has since been lost to history. But then he makes a claim that sends a shiver down the spine of any historian. He notes that some of his source maps dated back to the time of Alexander the Great in the 4th century BC. This single statement is an intellectual bombshell. It suggests a chain of knowledge, carefully preserved and passed down through generations of cartographers, stretching back nearly 2,000 years before his time. And where would such ancient maps have been kept? The trail inevitably leads to one place, the legendary Great Library of Alexandria. Founded by Ptolemy in the 3rd century BC, the library was the undisputed intellectual center of the ancient world. It was a beacon of human knowledge, a place where the greatest minds of the age, Eratosthenes, Euclid, Archimedes, Hypatia, came to study and to write. It was said to have held over 500,000 scrolls, containing the sum of human knowledge in mathematics, in astronomy, geography, and philosophy. Its destruction, piece by piece over centuries, is arguably the greatest intellectual catastrophe in Western history. We have no idea what we lost. Entire sciences, histories, and worldviews may have been turned to ash. Piri Reis's note suggests that some of the library's geographical knowledge may have survived. Perhaps copies were smuggled out. Perhaps they were preserved in other centers of learning, like Constantinople, the future Istanbul, where Piri Reis worked. The implication is staggering. The map we see today may not be a 16th century creation, but a 16th century copy of something far, far older. It could be a ghost, a precious, haunting echo of the knowledge of the ancient world. And what does this ghost tell us? It points south. The map's most controversial feature is its depiction of a southern landmass extending eastward from the coast of South America. For decades, this was dismissed as an error. But in the 1950s, a new kind of map was being made, a seismic map. Using modern echo-sounding technology, scientists were for the first time able to peer beneath the colossal Antarctic ice sheet and map the true shape of the continent's bedrock, the land that lies beneath the ice. This is where the story takes a turn into the truly inexplicable. When the seismic profile of the Antarctic coast, specifically the region known as Queen Maud Land, was compared to the coastline drawn by Piri Reis, the two maps aligned with chilling accuracy. The Piri Reis map appeared to show the coast of Antarctica not as it is today, but as it would have looked without ice. It shows bays, peninsulas, and river estuaries in places that are now buried under thousands of feet of solid ice. This is information that should have been impossible for anyone in 1513 to possess. It was knowledge that modern science only acquired with 20th century technology. Enter Charles Hapgood. In the 1960s, Hapgood, a Harvard-educated historian and professor at Keene State College, took on the Piri Reis mystery. He was not a sensationalist. He was a meticulous academic who, along with his students, dedicated years to studying this and other anomalous maps. His findings were published in his seminal 1966 book, Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings. Hapgood's conclusion was revolutionary. He argued that the Piri Reis map was proof of a sophisticated, global maritime civilization that existed during the last ice age, thousands of years before the recognized start of civilization in Sumeria or Egypt. He proposed that this forgotten civilization had mapped the entire globe with a level of scientific accuracy that would not be seen again until the 18th century. To explain how Antarctica could have been mapped when it was ice-free, Hapgood championed a controversial geological theory called Earth crust displacement. He hypothesized that the entire outer crust of the Earth could sometimes shift in one piece over the molten mantle below, moving entire continents into different climatic zones in a relatively short period of time. While this specific mechanism has since been largely discredited by the modern theory of plate tectonics, his core observation about the map's accuracy remains a profound and unanswered question. Did he find the right evidence, but propose the wrong explanation? Hapgood's team didn't stop at visual comparisons. With the help of the U.S. Air Force's Strategic Air Command, They analyzed the mathematical projection of the map. They discovered that it was a highly sophisticated portolan chart using a complex spherical trigonometry, with its central projection point located near the ancient city of Alexandria. This mathematical evidence strongly supported Piri Reis's own claim that he had used source maps from the time of Alexander the Great. If the Piri Reis map were a singular anomaly, it might be dismissed as a fluke. But it is not alone. In 1531, less than 2 decades after Piri Reis created his map, a French mathematician and cartographer named Orontius Phineus produced his own world map. And on it, he too drew a massive southern continent, Terra Australis. But this was no vague, empty space. Phineus's Antarctica is shockingly detailed. It is shown with a clear, ice-free coastline, with mountain ranges, valleys, and rivers flowing to the sea. Its overall shape is remarkably similar to the modern map of the continent's bedrock, and it is correctly centered on the South Pole. The details on the Phineus map are different from the Piri Reis map, yet they both seem to show the same ice-free continent. This suggests that the two cartographers were not copying each other, but were drawing from different independent source maps, all of which originated from that same lost, ancient tradition. It was as if two different survivors of a shipwreck had washed ashore, each carrying a different fragment of a blueprint for a world that no longer existed. This trail of evidence paints an extraordinary picture of a lost science, a forgotten age of exploration, preserved in fragments and passed down through millennia, finally finding its way into the hands of a 16th century Turkish admiral. It suggests that our historical narrative, with its neat, linear progression from primitive to modern, is fundamentally wrong. It hints at a history that moves in cycles, with peaks of knowledge and deep valleys of ignorance. And it leaves us with the most profound question of all. Who were these ancient sea kings? Who were the cartographers of a green Antarctica? And what other knowledge did they possess that has been lost to the unforgiving currents of time? The story is intoxicating. It's a grand historical mystery thriller. But science and academic history demand more than a good story. They demand rigorous proof, and it is here that the case for an ice-free Antarctica on a 16th century map begins to run into serious problems. The skeptical argument is less romantic, but it is built on a foundation of established facts and a healthy dose of academic discipline. The primary counterargument is the long and well-documented history of Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. This was not a real place, but a theoretical one. From the time of the ancient Greeks, philosophers and geographers like Aristotle and Ptolemy reasoned that to maintain the Earth's balance, there must be a large landmass in the southern hemisphere to equal the known lands of the north. For 2,000 years, this balancing continent was a standard feature on world maps. It was a geographical placeholder, an admission of ignorance, often drawn in fantastical shapes depending on the whim of the cartographer. Skeptics argue that the landmass on the Piri Reis map is not Antarctica at all. It is, they contend, simply the coast of South America, particularly Patagonia, which has been distorted and bent eastward to fit onto the limited space of the gazelle skin. If you look at the map from this perspective, the bays and rivers of the supposed Antarctica align reasonably well with the known features of the Argentinian and Chilean coasts. The map from this viewpoint doesn't show an unknown continent. It shows a known one, just drawn poorly. Furthermore, while proponents focus on the map's stunning accuracies, they often conveniently ignore its glaring inaccuracies. If this map was a product of a scientifically advanced civilization, why is it so wrong in so many places? The Caribbean is a mess of misshapen islands. Cuba is depicted as part of the North American mainland. The Amazon River is drawn twice. These are not minor errors. They suggest a cartographer who is stitching together fragmented, often contradictory information and using a healthy dose of guesswork to fill in the gaps. You cannot claim the map is proof of advanced science by cherry-picking the parts that look right while ignoring the parts that are demonstrably wrong. The so-called rivers and mountains on the Antarctic portion are also easily explained by conventional cartography of the period. It was standard practice for map makers to decorate unknown lands with stylized symbols to indicate they were unexplored but likely contained such features. These were not scientific surveys, they were artistic flourishes, signals to the viewer that said, "Here be dragons," or in this case, "Here be rivers." The case for Charles Hapgood, while fascinating, also rests on shaky ground. His central geological mechanism, Earth crust displacement, has been almost universally rejected by modern geophysics in favor of the much slower, evidence-based theory of plate tectonics. Antarctica did not become ice-free recently. Its deep freeze began 34 million years ago, and it has been almost entirely covered in a continental ice sheet for at least the last 15 million years. There is no geological evidence of a temperate, ice-free period during the rise of humanity in the last few 100,000 years. For Hapgood's theory to be correct, our entire understanding of geology, climatology, and human evolution would have to be wrong. And what of the lost civilization itself? It remains a complete ghost. Archaeology is a science of physical evidence, pottery shards, tools, foundations, bones. Despite a century of exploration in Antarctica, not a single shred of physical evidence for an indigenous, advanced civilization has ever been found. To propose such a culture based solely on the interpretation of a few ambiguous maps is to build a castle in the sky. This leads to the most probable, if least exciting, explanation for the Piri Reis map. It is a copy of a copy of a copy. Imagine a game of telephone played across 2 millennia, an ancient Greek map, based on sailors' accounts and philosophical theory, shows a theoretical southern land. A Roman copy adds a few flourishes. An Arab scholar in the Dark Ages tries to reconcile it with new information. By the time these fragmented, degraded sources reach Piri Reis in the 16th century, he does his best to synthesize them into a coherent whole. The final product is a composite, a masterpiece of its time, but one that is inevitably riddled with the accumulated errors, misunderstandings, and myths of its many predecessors. The resemblance of one small part of it to a subglacial coastline is, in the end, likely nothing more than a spectacular coincidence. So we are left with two compelling, yet mutually exclusive, narratives. The skeptical argument is sound, rational, and requires no great leaps of faith. It tidies up history and puts the map in its proper, albeit less mysterious, box. It is the safe harbor of conventional thought, and yet the ghost will not be exorcised so easily. The skeptical argument, for all its logic, struggles to explain away the sheer weight of coincidence. If the Piri Reis map's Antarctica is just a distorted Patagonia, how do we then account for the Orontius Phineus map, created independently on another continent by a different scholar using different source materials? It also depicts a detailed, ice-free Antarctica. For two different cartographers to make similar errors that just happen to align with subglacial topography pushes the boundaries of statistical probability. It is one thing to see a face in one cloud. It is another to see the same face in two different clouds in two different skies. At some point, coincidence begins to look like a pattern. This is the conundrum. To accept the mainstream view, you must believe in an almost miraculous series of coincidences. To accept the speculative view, you must believe in a lost chapter of human history for which we have no physical proof. There is no comfortable middle ground. The Piri Reis map, therefore, becomes more than just a geographical puzzle. It becomes a philosophical artifact that challenges our very conception of knowledge and time. We view history as a linear march of progress, an unbroken ascent from the Stone Age to the Space Age. The map suggests a different model, a cyclical one, with ages of enlightenment followed by ages of darkness and forgetting. It hints that it is possible for a civilization to achieve a high degree of scientific knowledge, and then for that knowledge to be almost completely erased, surviving only in faint, misunderstood echoes. What if the ancients knew the true circumference of the Earth, as some evidence suggests Eratosthenes did? What if they had a more sophisticated understanding of spherical trigonometry? What if they had charted the globe long before the age of discovery? And what if, in some great cataclysm or the slow decay of empire, almost all of that knowledge was lost? The Piri Reis map offers no final answers. It hangs in the Topkapi Palace today, a silent, enigmatic witness. It does not speak of what is true, but it forces us to question what we believe to be true. It is a testament to the fact that the ocean of the forgotten is vast, and we cannot be certain that we have found all of its islands. We are left to stare at its elegant lines, drawn on the skin of a gazelle 5 centuries ago, and wonder, are we looking at a brilliant, flawed masterpiece of the 16th century? Or are we looking at a message in a bottle from a world so ancient and so completely lost that we lack even a name for it? In the grand theater of history, some events are played out on the main stage, under the bright, hot lights of public record. Others are performed in the shadows, their true purpose whispered only by the actors involved. But Operation High Jump is something else entirely. It is a play that began under the guise of a scientific lecture, but whose final act seems to have been a panicked, desperate retreat from a drama far more terrifying than anyone in the audience was ever meant to see. The year is 1946. The world is taking its first ragged breath after 6 years of global suffocation. The great war machine of the United States is powering down. Factories are retooling for peace, soldiers are coming home, and a war-weary nation is turning its gaze inward, focused on building a new era of prosperity. It is in this exact climate of demobilization and austerity that the U.S. Navy decided to launch the single largest polar expedition in human history. Its official name was the United States Navy Antarctic Development Program, 1946-1947. Its public moniker was Operation High Jump, and its stated objectives were, on the surface, perfectly sensible. First, to train naval personnel and test military equipment in the planet's most extreme frigid conditions. With the dawn of a new Cold War against the Soviet Union, the strategic importance of the Arctic and Antarctic was growing. Second, to establish an American scientific and territorial foothold on the continent, specifically by building a research base called Little America Roman IV. And third, to perform scientific surveys, geological, magnetic, and aerial mapping. It was presented to the American public as a bold, peaceful, scientific endeavor, and to lead it, they chose a man who was the very personification of heroic polar exploration, Rear Admiral Richard E. Byard. Byard was a national icon, a Medal of Honor recipient, a man who had looked into the white abyss of both the North and South Poles and returned a hero. His name lent the mission an unimpeachable air of legitimacy. But beneath this placid surface of science and discovery, the facts of the operation tell a profoundly different story. This was not a small party of scientists and explorers. This was an armada. Task Force 68, as it was designated, consisted of 13 warships, including an aircraft carrier, the USS Philippine Sea. It included submarines, destroyers, icebreakers, tankers, and support vessels. It carried over 700 men, Marines, sailors, and aviators. It was equipped with dozens of aircraft, including helicopters, flying boats, and 6 R-4D transport planes fitted with advanced trimetrogon cameras for aerial mapping. Let's pause and consider this. An aircraft carrier battle group, complete with a submarine contingent and thousands of combat-ready troops, sent to an uninhabited continent of ice. This force was larger than many of the invasion fleets used during the Pacific campaign of World War II. The central, unavoidable question hangs heavy in the air. Why? Why dispatch a military force of this magnitude at a time of supposed peace and demobilization to map a frozen wasteland? What possible scientific objective could require such overwhelming military power? What were they expecting to find down there? The official narrative, when held against the sheer scale of the operation, begins to feel thin, like a blanket of fresh snow over something large, dark, and hard. It begins to feel like a cover story. And to find what it might be covering, we must leave 1946 for a moment and journey back to the dying days of the Third Reich. The story of the Nazi obsession with Antarctica begins not with a warship, but with a catapult-equipped freighter. In 1938, as Hitler was preparing to plunge Europe into war, the German Reich launched its own Antarctic expedition. The MS Schwabenland, a vessel refitted from the Lufthansa airline, steamed south. Its mission was ostensibly economic. Germany, under Allied blockade, was desperate for resources, particularly whale oil, a key component in producing margarine and soap. Establishing a permanent whaling station would secure this resource and showcase German technological prowess. Upon arrival, the Schwabenland's two seaplanes, the Passat and Boreas, launched from its steam catapults and flew over 600,000 photographic sorties, mapping a vast, unscouted territory. To claim it for the Reich, they dropped thousands of small metal darts embossed with the swastika onto the ice below. They named this new German territory New Schwabenland, New Swabia. But as with everything in the Third Reich, there was a public story and a hidden, ideological one. The Nazi High Command, particularly figures like Heinrich Himmler and Rudolf Hess, were deeply enmeshed in occultism and fringe historical theories. Organizations like the Thule Society and the Vril Society believed in a lost Aryan homeland, a place of immense power and forgotten knowledge, Thule or Hyperborea. They scoured the globe for evidence of this mythical homeland and for gateways to other realms. For them, Antarctica, a land of stark, alien beauty, shrouded in mystery and ancient ice, was a prime candidate. The Schwabenland expedition, therefore, may have been as much an occult pilgrimage as a scientific one. This historical footnote explodes into a full-blown conspiracy theory in the final, chaotic months of World War II. As the Reich crumbled, a persistent legend began to circulate among Allied intelligence circles, the legend of Base 211. According to this story, the Nazis had used the years since their 1938 expedition to build a secret, impregnable fortress, a redoubt deep within the mountains and ice caves of New Schwabenland. This was to be the sanctuary for the Nazi elite, a place to regroup, to safeguard their most advanced technology, and to prepare for the rise of a Fourth Reich. The base was also known by another name, New Berlin, fantasy, perhaps, but then came the strange, documented events of mid-1945. 2 months after the unconditional surrender of Germany, a German U-boat, U-530, mysteriously surfaced and surrendered to the Argentine Navy at Mar del Plata. A month later, another U-boat, U-977, did the exact same thing. The timing was deeply suspicious. Where had these submarines been for the months following the end of the war? Their logs were missing or incomplete. Their captains and crews were evasive under interrogation. The rumors flew. Had these submarines been part of a top-secret convoy, a Führer convoy, that had transported high-ranking Nazis like Martin Bormann or even Hitler himself to safety? Had they been ferrying not just men, but the Reich's most precious technological secrets? The U-boats were not just standard vessels. Some were advanced Type Roman 21 Electroboots, the most sophisticated submarines of the war, capable of remaining submerged for far longer than Allied vessels. They had the range and capability to make the journey to Antarctica. Did they make a final drop-off at Base 211 before sailing to Argentina to surrender? This theory gains terrifying credibility when we consider the context of Nazi wonder weapons or Wunderwaffen. At the end of the war, Allied forces launched Operation Paperclip, a secret program to capture and recruit over 600 of Germany's top scientists, engineers, and technicians. We know about Wernher von Braun and his team, who went on to build the rockets for NASA Apollo program. But what about the technologies that were even more secret, more exotic? Legends persist of projects that were so advanced, they sound like science fiction. Chief among them is the project known as Die Glock, the bell. According to lore, this was a metallic, bell-shaped device, worked on by the infamous SS General Hans Kammler, that was said to generate a powerful torsion field, capable of manipulating gravity and spacetime itself. Then there were the rumored German flying disc programs, the Honnebu and Vril craft. These were saucer-shaped, allegedly powered by unconventional energy sources and capable of flight characteristics, silent, high-speed right-angle turns that defied conventional aerodynamics. Now, let us put all these pieces together. Allied intelligence, sifting through the wreckage of the Third Reich and interrogating captured German personnel, gets wind of a horrifying possibility. A remnant of the Nazi regime has survived. They are hiding in a secret base in Antarctica, and they are in possession of technologies, anti-gravity, beam weapons, advanced aircraft that are decades, if not centuries, ahead of our own. From this perspective, Operation High Jump is suddenly cast in a new, chilling light. It was not a scientific mission. It was a covert military operation, a mop-up job of the highest urgency. The massive carrier task force was not for testing equipment. It was for hunting and destroying Base 211, Admiral Bayard. The national hero was the perfect public cover for a secret war at the end of the world. This theory explains the scale, the urgency, and the military composition of the fleet. It also provides a potential explanation for what happened next, because if High Jump was a secret war, it was a war the United States appears to have lost. The mission was planned to last for 6 to 8 months, to carry on through the Antarctic winter. Instead, it was suddenly and inexplicably terminated after just 8 weeks. In late February 1947, the order was given for a full and immediate withdrawal. The official explanation was that the mission had been so successful it had accomplished its goals ahead of schedule, and that the approaching winter posed too great a risk. This explanation is difficult to accept. Planners of a multi-million-dollar naval operation would have been well aware of the Antarctic seasons. Something else happened. Something went wrong. Something forced a panicked retreat. Upon his return, a tight-lipped Admiral Bayard was debriefed by military intelligence, but during a stopover in Chile, he gave a remarkable and now famous interview to a journalist named Lee Van Atta for the El Mercurio newspaper. According to Van Atta's report, Bayard issued a grave warning. He stated that it was necessary for the USA to take defensive actions against enemy air fighters which come from the polar regions. He went on to speak of the bitter reality that in case of a new war, the continental United States would be attacked by flying objects which could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. Let us be clear, this is not a tabloid rumor. This is a public statement attributed to a revered American admiral and polar explorer. Flying objects coming from the polar regions, flying at incredible speeds. Who was he talking about? The war-beaten Soviets had no such technology. The only power that was rumored to be developing such craft was the very enemy he was supposedly sent to investigate. Bayard's statement seems to be a thinly veiled admission. We went down there, we found something, and we were decisively outmatched. This is where the story takes its final, breathtaking plunge into the abyss of high strangeness. It centers around a document that is, to this day, one of the most controversial in all of ufology and conspiracy research. The alleged secret diary of Admiral Bayard. It is crucial to state that mainstream historians and the Bayard family have long maintained this diary is a forgery, a piece of pulp fiction likely created decades after his death. It does not exist in his official papers, and yet, its narrative has become so entwined with the high jump legend that it cannot be ignored. Forgery or not, it offers a story, a mythos that attempts to fill the vacuum of silence left by the official record. According to the diary, on February 19, 1947, Bayard departed on a reconnaissance flight over the continent. After flying for some time, he observed a mountain range he had never seen before. Then his aircraft's instruments, both magnetic and gyroscopic compasses, began to spin wildly. His plane was seized by an unknown force. Outside his cockpit, he saw not the white desolation of Antarctica, but a lush, green valley with rivers, forests, and strange animals resembling mammoths. The sky had a violet hue. Then he writes he saw them. Disc-shaped aircraft, gleaming and moving with impossible silence and speed, flanked his plane. Emblazoned on their hulls was a symbol he knew all too well, a swastika. He was forced to land, not by his own control, but as if his plane were held in an invisible vise. He was met by tall, blonde, Nordic-looking men who escorted him into a glittering, crystalline subterranean city. The diary calls this place Ariany, located in the inner world of Agartha. He was taken before a figure he calls the Master. This being, ancient and wise, informed Bayard that they were the inhabitants of this inner world, a race that had separated from surface humanity thousands of years ago. They had built a civilization of peace and advanced science. They had watched with growing concern as surface humanity discovered, and then weaponized atomic energy. The nuclear bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they explained, had alarmed them and forced them to intervene. They had sent their flying machines, the Flugelrads, to investigate the surface world. Bayat, they said, was chosen for his noble character to carry a message back to humanity. Cease your wars and your nuclear madness, or you will bring about your own destruction. He was then escorted back to his plane and returned to the world of ice, his mind reeling. How do we process such a story? The simplest answer is to dismiss it as a complete fabrication, an entertaining piece of fiction. But what if it's not? What if the diary is not a literal account, but an allegorical one? A coded debriefing of a real, traumatic event. Let's re-examine it through the lens of the secret war hypothesis. Perhaps Bayat did encounter strange, disc-shaped aircraft. Perhaps they did bear the swastika. Perhaps he was taken not to a mystical inner Earth, but to the highly advanced, subterranean Nazi base 211. Perhaps the master was not a wise, ancient being, but the leader of the Nazi remnant, who demonstrated their technological superiority, their Flugelrads, their beam weapons, and issued an ultimatum, not a plea for peace. It would explain the mission's sudden failure and panicked retreat. It would explain Bayat's cryptic public warnings about flying objects from the pole. The diary, in this interpretation, becomes Bayat's desperate attempt to record a reality so shocking and so classified that it could never be spoken of plainly. Whether we believe in a secret war, a mystical encounter, or a combination of both, the timeline that follows is undeniable and deeply unsettling. Operation High Jump ends in a hurried retreat in late February 1947. Admiral Bayat makes his public alarming statements about fast-moving polar objects in March. And then, just 4 months later, in the summer of 1947, the skies over America erupted. This was the beginning of the modern UFO phenomenon. It was the summer of Kenneth Arnold's famous sighting of flying saucers over Mount Rainier. And it was, most famously, the summer of the Roswell incident in New Mexico, where the U.S. military was alleged to have recovered a crashed disk and its non-human occupants. Is the timing a coincidence, or is it a direct causal link? Did the conflict in Antarctica in the winter of '47 spill over into the skies of the American Southwest in the summer? Did whatever Bayat's forces encountered, whether Nazi superscience or something else entirely, follow them home? Did the crash at Roswell represent the downing of one of these very same craft that had harassed the fleet in Antarctica? This grand, unified theory connects the Third Reich's occult science, the mystery of Operation High Jump, and the birth of the UFO age into a single, sprawling narrative of a secret war that never ended, but simply changed its battlefield from the ice of Antarctica to the deserts of New Mexico. The official records of Operation High Jump remain, to this day, heavily classified. The full report of Bayat's mission is sealed. The truth of what happened in those 8 weeks of the Antarctic summer of 1946-47 is locked away in a vault of military secrecy. We are left with a profound and disturbing enigma. Was Operation High Jump a simple scientific mission that was ill-prepared for the Antarctic winter? Was it a secret, undeclared war against a technologically superior Nazi remnant? A battle that was so decisively lost that it had to be erased from history? Or was it something even more profound? Humanity's first major, documented confrontation with a non-human intelligence, terrestrial or otherwise, an encounter so reality-shattering that it has been veiled for over 75 years. The silence from the Pentagon and the silence from the ice is as vast, as cold, and as impenetrable as the Antarctic continent itself. The human imagination tends to look for secrets in artifacts of the past, in silent pyramids and cryptic maps. We search for the ghosts of what was, but Antarctica, in its profound and brutal strangeness, forces upon us a different kind of inquiry. It directs our gaze not just to the dead, but to the living. It suggests that the continent's greatest enigmas may not be the relics of a lost civilization, but the existence of life itself. Thriving in forms and in places so utterly hostile, they may as well be another world. To find the first of these living mysteries, we must journey to the driest, coldest, and most alien landscape on the face of the Earth, the McMurdo Dry Valleys. To call this place a desert is an understatement. It is the Antarctica, a 900 square mile region where the katabatic winds, sometimes reaching 200 miles per hour, are so fierce and so dry that they sublimate all moisture, scouring the ground of any snow or ice. The humidity is practically zero. It hasn't seen a drop of rain in an estimated 2 million years. This is a landscape of profound, unsettling silence. A polar desert so hostile that scientists from NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory come here to test equipment for future missions to Mars. The ground is a barren, rust-colored gravel, littered with wind-sculpted boulders called ventifacts. The most haunting features are the mummified remains of seals, thousands of years old, found miles from the coast, their bodies perfectly preserved in the sterile, cryogenic air. They are ancient mariners who took a wrong turn and wandered inland to die, becoming permanent, leathery monuments to the unforgiving nature of this place. It is here, in this realm of absolute desolation, that the planet appears to have an open wound. From the snout of the Taylor Glacier, a tongue of ice 5 stories high, something seeps out and stains the pristine white ice of Lake Bonny below. It is a slow, viscous, and deeply disturbing hemorrhage of the deepest crimson. This is Blood Falls. Discovered in 1911 by the Australian geologist Griffith Taylor during Robert Falcon Scott's ill-fated expedition, the falls baffled its first observers. They initially hypothesized that the shocking red color was caused by a species of red algae. But the truth, when it was finally uncovered by modern science nearly a century later, proved to be infinitely stranger and more profound. The falls are not a sign of surface life. They are a window into a hidden, subterranean world. The origin of Blood Falls is a story of geological imprisonment. Roughly 2 million years ago, as the last ice ages convulsed the planet, the mighty Taylor Glacier advanced. As it ground its way forward, it flowed over a small, ancient lake, sealing it off from the rest of the world. It became a time capsule, a pocket of the ancient world buried under a quarter-mile of solid ice, entombed in darkness and crushing pressure. The water in this subglacial lake was not fresh. It was a hypersaline brine, so saturated with salt that its freezing point is far below that of regular water, allowing it to remain liquid even in the deep cold beneath the glacier. As this primordial water sat trapped for millennia, it interacted with the iron-rich bedrock below. Without any contact with the atmosphere, the water became saturated with dissolved iron, but it had no oxygen with which to react. It became an anoxic, iron-rich fluid, a potential form of blood for a world without lungs. Over the eons, the immense pressure of the overlying glacier found a fissure, a tiny crack through which this ancient brine could escape, and so it began its slow journey to the surface. And when this water, which has not seen the sky or felt a breath of fresh air for 2 million years, finally oozes from the glacier's snout, a dramatic chemical reaction takes place. The dissolved iron within it makes contact with the oxygen in our atmosphere for the very first time. It oxidizes, it rusts. The deep, disturbing, blood-red color of the falls is nothing more and nothing less than the color of rapidly forming rust. It is the color of a world's worth of held breath being exhaled in a single, slow, geological moment. This explanation alone is a stunning piece of geological detective work. But the true miracle of Blood Falls is not in its chemistry, but in its biology. Scientists were astounded to discover that this ancient, dark, oxygen-free brine was teeming with life, not fossils, living, breathing organisms. They found a complex and self-sustaining ecosystem of at least 17 different types of microorganisms, a community that has been evolving in complete isolation for millions of years. In the total absence of sunlight, photosynthesis is impossible. In the absence of oxygen, respiration as we know it is impossible. So how do these microbes survive? They have evolved to perform a biological alchemy that rewrites the rules of life. They are extremophiles. They use a unique metabolic pathway to survive. Instead of breathing oxygen, they breathe sulfate. and instead of eating sugars produced by sunlight, they eat the dissolved ferrous iron in the brine itself. They have become lithotrophs, rock eaters, deriving their life energy directly from the minerals of their buried world. This discovery was a paradigm shift in our understanding of the requirements for life. It proved definitively that life does not need the sun. It doesn't need warmth. It doesn't need a breathable atmosphere as we know it. All life truly needs, in its most fundamental form, is liquid water and a chemical gradient, an energy source it can exploit. Blood Falls is a self-contained biosphere, a proof of concept that life can persist and even thrive in the most extreme, alien environments imaginable on our own planet. The scientific story of Blood Falls is, in its own right, a thing of wonder, but its implications ripple outwards, far beyond geology and biology, into the realm of the truly profound. This is because Blood Falls is more than just a terrestrial curiosity. It is a blueprint. It is our single best analog for how life might exist on other worlds right here in our own solar system. For astrobiologists, the discovery of the Blood Falls ecosystem was like finding a Rosetta Stone for extraterrestrial life. Consider Mars. We know the red planet had a watery past, and we have strong evidence that hypersaline liquid brines may still exist beneath its frozen surface today. The conditions in a Martian subsurface aquifer could be remarkably similar to the iron-rich, anoxic environment beneath the Taylor Glacier. If life can thrive there on Earth, why not on Mars? Now consider Jupiter's moon Europa or Saturn's moon Enceladus. These are ice worlds, their surfaces frozen solid. But beneath their icy shells, tidal forces from their parent planets are thought to keep vast, global oceans of liquid water warm. These oceans are in direct contact with a rocky core, providing a potential source of chemical nutrients, just like the bedrock beneath Blood Falls. For decades, these moons have been our prime candidates for extraterrestrial life, and the ecosystem at Blood Falls provides a powerful, tangible model for exactly how such life might work, hidden deep beneath the ice, completely independent of the faint sunlight that reaches those distant worlds. Blood Falls is a quiet but insistent voice, telling us that the search for life should not be confined to Earth-like planets, but should extend to the dark, cold, and hidden places of the cosmos. And yet, even as science celebrates this discovery, a sense of mystery lingers around the falls. The elegant explanation of its chemistry and biology doesn't erase the primal, unsettling power of its appearance. It still looks like a wound, and for some, this leads to a different line of questioning. Is it merely a coincidence that this bizarre, life-giving discharge occurs on the most mysterious continent on Earth? A continent rife with stories of buried pyramids and secret bases. Fringe theories, while unproven, ask us to consider alternative possibilities. Could a feature like Blood Falls be more than just a natural seepage? In a realm of extreme cold, any source of liquid water and chemical energy would be an invaluable resource. Could this natural outlet be a thermal discharge, a waste vent, for something much larger and more complex buried deep within the ice sheet? Could the unique chemical signature be the byproduct of an unknown, ancient technology slowly corroding away in its icy tomb, leaching its metallic essence into the groundwater? These questions are, of course, purely speculative, but they tap into the same vein of thought that the scientific discovery does, that Antarctica hides living systems, functioning in ways we are only just beginning to comprehend. Whether those systems are microbial ecosystems or something far stranger, Blood Falls serves as a visible, bleeding reminder that the ice is not dead. It is a veil, and what lies beneath it is still very much alive. The scientific story of Blood Falls is, in its own right, a thing of wonder, but its implications ripple outwards, far beyond geology and biology, into the realm of the truly profound. This is because Blood Falls is more than just a terrestrial curiosity. It is a blueprint. It is our single best analog for how life might exist on other worlds right here in our own solar system. For astrobiologists, the discovery of the Blood Falls ecosystem was like finding a Rosetta Stone for extraterrestrial life. Consider Mars. We know the red planet had a watery past, and we have strong evidence that hypersaline liquid brines may still exist beneath its frozen surface today. The conditions in a Martian subsurface aquifer could be remarkably similar to the iron-rich, anoxic environment beneath the Taylor Glacier. If life can thrive there on Earth, why not on Mars? Now consider Jupiter's moon Europa or Saturn's moon Enceladus. These are ice worlds, their surfaces frozen solid. But beneath their icy shells, tidal forces from their parent planets are thought to keep vast, global oceans of liquid water warm. These oceans are in direct contact with a rocky core, providing a potential source of chemical nutrients, just like the bedrock beneath Blood Falls. For decades, these moons have been our prime candidates for extraterrestrial life, and the ecosystem at Blood Falls provides a powerful, tangible model for exactly how such life might work, hidden deep beneath the ice, completely independent of the faint sunlight that reaches those distant worlds. Blood Falls is a quiet but insistent voice, telling us that the search for life should not be confined to Earth-like planets, but should extend to the dark, cold, and hidden places of the cosmos. And yet, even as science celebrates this discovery, a sense of mystery lingers around the falls. The elegant explanation of its chemistry and biology doesn't erase the primal, unsettling power of its appearance. It still looks like a wound, and for some, this leads to a different line of questioning. Is it merely a coincidence that this bizarre, life-giving discharge occurs on the most mysterious continent on Earth? A continent rife with stories of buried pyramids and secret bases. Fringe theories, while unproven, ask us to consider alternative possibilities. Could a feature like Blood Falls be more than just a natural seepage? In a realm of extreme cold, any source of liquid water and chemical energy would be an invaluable resource. Could this natural outlet be a thermal discharge, a waste vent, for something much larger and more complex buried deep within the ice sheet? Could the unique chemical signature be the byproduct of an unknown, ancient technology slowly corroding away in its icy tomb, leaching its metallic essence into the groundwater? These questions are, of course, purely speculative, but they tap into the same vein of thought that the scientific discovery does, that Antarctica hides living systems, functioning in ways we are only just beginning to comprehend. Whether those systems are microbial ecosystems or something far stranger, Blood Falls serves as a visible, bleeding reminder that the ice is not dead. It is a veil, and what lies beneath it is still very much alive. Human beings are creatures of law and lines. We draw borders on maps, build fences on land, and create treaties to govern our behavior. We believe that through ink and intention, we can impose order on chaos, and in no place has this belief been tested more profoundly than in Antarctica. For over 60 years, a single, remarkable document has held the continent in a state of suspended animation, a fragile piece preserved in the name of science. This is the story of the Antarctic Treaty. It is a story that can be read in two ways: as humanity's most noble achievement in international cooperation, or as the most sophisticated and successful cover-up in human history. To understand the treaty, we must first understand the moment of its birth. The late 1950, the Cold War was at its iciest. The United States and the Soviet Union stood eyeball to eyeball, their arsenals bristling with nuclear weapons. And yet, in the midst of this global tension, a miracle of cooperation occurred. The International Geophysical Year, or IG, of 1957-58. For 18 months, scientists from 67 nations, including the US and the USSR, agreed to put politics aside and work together to study the Earth and its cosmic environment. It was a brief, brilliant thaw in the Cold War, a testament to the unifying power of scientific curiosity. Antarctica was the centerpiece of the IGY. 12 nations established over 50 research stations on the ice. They shared data, collaborated on projects, and for a moment, the continent became a symbol of what humanity could achieve when it focused on exploration instead of conflict. But this utopian moment was built on a foundation of geopolitical quicksand. Before the IGY, Antarctica was a powder keg. 7 different nations, the United Kingdom, Argentina, Chile, France, Norway, Australia, and New Zealand, had laid formal territorial claims to pie-shaped wedges of the continent. Complicating matters, the claims of the UK, Argentina, and Chile all overlapped in the strategically important Antarctic Peninsula, leading to diplomatic protests and even occasional shots fired. Both the United States and the Soviet Union. The two new superpowers had extensive interests there, but made no formal claims, reserving the right to do so later. The continent was on the verge of being carved up, a potential flashpoint for a new kind of colonial conflict fought at the bottom of the world. It was out of this impending chaos, and on the heels of the IGY's success, that the Antarctic Treaty was born. In 1959, the 12 nations that had been active on the ice during the IGY met in Washington, D.C. to forge a new future for the continent. The document they created was a masterclass in diplomacy. Its core principles were revolutionary. Article I declared that Antarctica shall be used for peaceful purposes only. It banned any and all military activity, no bases, no fortifications, no weapons testing. In a single sentence, it made Antarctica the world's first and only non-militarized continent, a permanent zone of peace. Article Roman II enshrined science as the continent's new religion, stating that freedom of scientific investigation shall continue. Article Roman III mandated transparency, requiring that all scientific plans, personnel, and results be openly exchanged among the signatory nations. It even gave nations the right to conduct on-site inspections of any other nation's stations to ensure no treaty violations were occurring. But the true genius of the treaty lies in Article Roman IV. This was the elegant solution to the intractable problem of the competing territorial claims. The article does not resolve the claims. It doesn't deny them, nor does it recognize them. It simply freezes them in place, stating that nothing in the treaty shall be interpreted as a renunciation or a support of any prior claim, and that no new claims can be made while the treaty is in force. It was a brilliant diplomatic maneuver that allowed everyone to agree to disagree, setting aside the thorny issue of sovereignty to pursue the higher goals of peace and science. For over 6 decades, this noble experiment has been a resounding success. The treaty system has grown to include over 50 nations, representing more than 80% of the world's population. It has protected the continent's fragile environment, fostered groundbreaking scientific research, and prevented a resource-driven conflict. Antarctica stands as a monument to human reason, a working model for how we might govern other shared frontiers, like the deep sea or outer space. It is, by all public accounts, a utopian vision made real. The official story is clean, noble, and inspiring, and for many, it is the whole story. But for a growing number of researchers and skeptics, this utopian narrative feels too neat, too clean. When you examine the treaty not just as a legal document, but as a historical event, troubling questions begin to emerge. They suggest that the treaty may not have been a proactive step towards a peaceful future, but a reactive, panicked measure to control a terrifying past. The first crack in the official narrative is the question of control. If Antarctica is a continent dedicated to open science for all humanity, why is it one of the most tightly controlled and restricted places on Earth? Gaining permission to conduct an independent expedition is a bureaucratic nightmare, prohibitively expensive and subject to the approval of the very national bodies that have a vested interest in the status quo. Vast swaths of the continent are designated as specially protected areas or have de facto no-fly zones, restricting access to all but a select few. The official reason is always environmental protection, a noble cause. But for skeptics, it also serves as a convenient and unassailable excuse to keep people away from potentially sensitive areas. The greatest source of suspicion, however, is the timing. Let us revisit the timeline. Operation High Jump. The massive and mysteriously curtailed American military operation takes place in 1946-47. The summer of 1947 sees the explosion of the modern UFO phenomenon in America, including the Roswell incident. The years that follow are rife with rumors of captured Nazi technology, secret polar bases, and ongoing military encounters with unidentified flying objects. And then, precisely at the peak of this high strangeness, the world's powers suddenly decide to come together. The IGY is organized for 1957-58. The Antarctic Treaty is drafted and signed in 1959. From a conspiratorial point of view, this is not a coincidence. It is cause and effect. The theory is that the world's major powers, specifically the United States and the Soviet Union, discovered something in Antarctica during this post-war period. Something so profound, so paradigm-shifting, and so potentially destabilizing to our civilization that they mutually agreed it could never be revealed. They needed a mechanism, a way to lock down an entire continent, to control all access, to manage all scientific research, and to do it all under a plausible, publicly acceptable pretext. The Antarctic Treaty, from this dark perspective, was that mechanism. It was not an instrument of peace and science. It was an instrument of information control. It was the founding charter of a planetary quarantine. What could they have discovered that would warrant such an extreme reaction? The possibilities echo the themes of our investigation. Did Operation High Jump confirm the existence of a Nazi redoubt in Neuschwabenland, one that possessed technology so far advanced that it could not be defeated and had to be contained? Did Admiral Bayard's fleet get a bloody nose from advanced flying discs, forcing the U.S. military into a secret, ongoing Cold War at the South Pole? Or was the discovery archaeological? Had U.S. or Soviet reconnaissance flights captured clear images of the pyramidal structures and other anomalies, confirming that an ancient civilization had once existed on the continent? The revelation that human history is millions of years older than we believe would shatter the foundations of every religion and historical narrative on the planet. Or was the discovery not human at all, a persistent theory, and perhaps the most explosive? Is that what was found was not a Nazi base or a lost city, but a crashed extraterrestrial vehicle? In this scenario, the US and the Soviets, despite being mortal enemies, recognized that the technology and implications of such a find were too great for any one nation to control. The treaty became a joint custody agreement, turning the entire continent into a classified research facility, its network of science bases acting as cover for a secret multinational program to reverse engineer alien technology. This hypothesis reframes every article of the treaty. The ban on military activity wasn't to ensure peace. It was to prevent the other superpower from trying to seize the prize by force. The freedom of scientific exchange wasn't about open data. It was about ensuring both sides were sharing their findings on the project, and neither was getting too far ahead. The inspection rights weren't for treaty compliance. They were for espionage, allowing each side to keep an eye on the other's progress. The freezing of territorial claims wasn't a diplomatic nicety. It was a necessary precondition for managing a secret of global importance, ensuring no single nation could claim legal ownership of the discovery site. This dark interpretation has been fueled over the years by a steady trickle of anecdotal evidence and alleged whistleblower testimony. Men who claim to have served as military contractors or naval personnel in Antarctica have come forward with incredible stories of seeing strange lights in the sky, of being flown over massive geometric openings in the ice, of being warned by their superiors never to speak about what they saw in certain restricted areas. While these stories remain unverified, they paint a consistent picture of a continent with two realities: the public face of peaceful science, and a deep, classified underbelly of secrets and surveillance. For more than 60 years, this presumed veil of secrecy has held. The treaty has been the perfect tool of control, the perfect manager of the Antarctic narrative. But we have now entered a new era, one defined by a force that no treaty can bind, no military can contain, and no secret can withstand. That force is climate change, and it is poised to render the entire debate over the treaty's true purpose irrelevant: the ice itself. The ancient warden of Antarctica's secrets is beginning to fail. The scientific data is unambiguous and terrifying. The Antarctic Peninsula is one of the most rapidly warming regions on the planet, its average temperature having risen by nearly 3 degrees Celsius in the last half-century. we have watched in satellite imagery as colossal ice shelves. Like the Larsen B shelf in 2002, a slab of ice larger than the state of Rhode Island shattered and collapsed into the ocean in a matter of weeks. And the true danger lies with the continent's land-based glaciers. Glaciers like the Pine Island Glacier and Thwaites Glacier, nicknamed the Doomsday Glacier, are melting from below, lubricated by warming ocean waters. These glaciers act as plugs, holding back the immense West Antarctic ice sheet as they weaken and retreat. The entire ice sheet could begin an irreversible slide into the ocean. The numbers are almost incomprehensible. Antarctica holds enough frozen water to raise global sea levels by nearly 200 feet. We are not talking about flooded basements. We are talking about the complete erasure of virtually every coastal city on Earth. This imminent catastrophe creates a profound and desperate paradox. The melting of Antarctica is arguably the single greatest existential threat to our global civilization. And yet, at the exact same time, it represents the single greatest opportunity for discovery in human history. Every glacier that retreats is a potential archaeological dig on a scale never before seen. Every ice shelf that collapses reveals a coastline that has not been seen for thousands or even millions of years. The ice that has so effectively hidden the continent's secrets is now set to become their instrument of revelation. And all the questions we have been asking may soon be answered, whether we are ready for the answers or not. What will we see? If the ice around the Ellsworth Mountains continues to retreat, will we finally be able to conduct a ground-level survey of the pyramid? Will we find that it is merely a curiously shaped mountain? Or will we find tool marks on its surface, a smooth casing stone, or even an entrance? As the coastlines of Queen Maud Land are revealed, will they match the strange, distorted coast of Patagonia, as the skeptics claim? Or will they match the eerie, ice-free depictions on the maps of Piri Reis and Orontius Phineus, proving that an ancient civilization had indeed mapped them in a forgotten age? If a secret Nazi redoubt like Base 211 truly exists, its doom is sealed. The melting ice will eventually expose its camouflaged entrances, its buried structures, its rusting artifacts. The secret war, if it ever existed, will be over, its battlefield laid bare for all to see. And if the wildest theories are true, if the great secret is an alien craft or the ruins of a non-human technology, its vault is now melting. The quarantine is failing. The treaty, for all its power, can only govern the actions of men. It cannot govern the temperature of the oceans. We are now in a race against time, a race against ourselves. Can we curb our carbon emissions and stabilize the climate, keeping Antarctica's secrets and its apocalyptic sea level potential locked in the freezer? Or will our inaction force a global reckoning, revealing a history so profound that it rewrites our identity? Just as the rising waters rewrite the maps of our world, perhaps the ultimate secret of Antarctica is not a structure or an object, but a warning. The continent's ice cores are a perfect, high-fidelity record of Earth's climate history, a library of past worlds. For decades, the science coming from Antarctica has been screaming a warning at us about our own fragility. By ignoring that warning, we may be setting in motion the very mechanism that will expose a different kind of history, a history of other civilizations, perhaps, that rose and fell with the changing climate of the planet. The future of Antarctica is now inextricably bound to the future of our own civilization. Its secrets are no longer secure. A great thaw is coming, not just for the ice, but for the truth. So what is the Antarctic Enigma? A pyramid or a mountain? A prehistoric map or a cartographic error? A secret mission or a paranoid fantasy? On one hand, science offers logical, compelling explanations grounded in geology, physics, and history. They paint a picture of a continent shaped by natural forces over millions of years. On the other hand, a persistent pattern of anomalies refuses to be ignored, a collection of riddles that, when viewed together, hints at a narrative far grander and more mysterious than the one we know. These two stories, science and speculation, are braided together, woven into the very ice of the continent. Perhaps the true purpose of these enigmas is not to provide a definitive answer, but to force us to ask profound questions, to challenge our assumptions about history, science, and our place in the cosmos. Antarctica is a mirror, reflecting our own curiosity, our courage to embrace the unknown, and our relentless drive to seek the truth. It reminds us that the world is still full of wonder, and that the greatest discoveries may lie just beyond the edge of our accepted reality. The final chapter of Antarctica's story has yet to be written. It will be authored by melting ice and human curiosity. What do you believe lies beneath the ice? A lost civilization, a natural wonder, or something else entirely? Share your theories in the comments below. For more journeys into the world's greatest mysteries, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. The exploration has just begun.